Unaware that the wife he pushed out of a moving car had survived and had just won a $500 million lottery, the husband celebrated with his mistress and walked away. But what she did next ruined him completely. Daniel Carter believed the problem was solved the moment Olivia's body disappeared into the darkness behind his speeding car. He believed that pushing his wife out of a moving car meant silence. He believed survival was impossible. He believed $500 million belonged in fairy tales, not in the trembling hands of the woman he had just tried to erase. But Olivia survived, and 3 hours before he pushed her out of that moving car, she had just won a $500 million lottery jackpot, a ticket she bought in secret after months of humiliation, betrayal, and emotional neglect from the very husband who now thought she was gone. While Daniel raised a glass of champagne with his mistress in celebration of his new beginning, laughing, walking away from the wreckage of his marriage, Olivia lay in a hospital bed, breathing, alive, and holding a lottery ticket worth $500 million. He celebrated. She survived. He walked away. She awakened. But Daniel had no idea that the wife he pushed out of a moving car was no longer powerless. He had no idea that the woman he discarded had just won $500 million. He had no idea that survival changes everything. And he certainly had no idea what she was about to do next. Because what can a wife do when she survives attempted betrayal? What happens when a husband celebrates too soon? What does a $500 million lottery win mean in the hands of a woman who has nothing left to lose? And how exactly does a man who thought he walked away end up completely ruined? If he had known she survived, if he had known about the $500 million lottery, would he still have pushed her out of that moving car? Daniel's hand did not tremble when he reached across her body. That was what frightened Olivia the most. Not the speed of the car, not the dark stretch of empty highway, not even Vanessa's perfume lingering faintly on his shirt from earlier that evening. It was the calm. "You're overreacting," Daniel said, eyes fixed on the road. His voice carried the same tone he used when correcting a sales associate, detached, irritated, superior. "I'm your wife," Olivia whispered. "We can fix this. Fix this." In the words echoed against the memory of who they used to be. Two 25-year-olds eating instant noodles in a tiny apartment, laughing over unpaid bills, promising each other that when success came, they would share it. Back then, Daniel had held her hand like she was his anchor. Now his fingers curled around the door handle. He slowed the car just slightly. "Daniel," she said, sensing the shift in the air. Vanessa's laugh from earlier replayed in her mind, the way Daniel had answered a call in the kitchen and stepped outside to whisper, the way he'd been increasingly obsessed with money these past 6 months. His dealership loans were overdue. She had seen the notices before he changed the mailbox key. She had confronted him once. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked that night. "Because you panic," he snapped. "You think small. I'm thinking big." Big had become reckless investments, risky partnerships, hidden accounts, and now this. The car drifted toward the shoulder. "Daniel, let's just go home," she pleaded softly. He finally looked at her, not with love, not even with anger, with calculation. "You think you're entitled to half?" he said quietly. The words chilled her. Half of what? Debt? Pride? A crumbling empire built on fragile ego? She opened her mouth to respond, but he had already leaned across her body. The click of the door unlocking sounded louder than the engine. Time slowed. She saw the tension in his jaw, the hardness in his eyes, the man she married flickering faintly beneath layers of ambition and fear. "Daniel, don't." But desperation had already swallowed reason. He shoved her. The world became asphalt and impact and air torn from lungs. Her body rolled violently, skin scraping, shoulders snapping against pavement. She felt ribs crack like dry wood. The sky spun above her in dizzying circles. Then stillness. Somewhere far away, tires accelerated. Silence returned. Pain flooded in waves. She tried to breathe. Fire filled her chest. A memory flashed. The hospital break room television earlier that evening. The lottery numbers. The trembling in her hands. The ticket folded carefully behind her driver's license. She had planned to tell him. She had imagined walking into the dealership tomorrow and saying, "We don't have to struggle anymore." Instead, she lay bleeding under a quiet sky. Headlights appeared in the distance. For a terrifying second, she wondered if Daniel had come back to finish what he started. But the vehicle slowed. A truck door slammed. Footsteps rushed toward her. "Oh my God, ma'am, can you hear me?" She blinked. Alive. Meanwhile, miles away, Daniel finally exhaled. Vanessa reached across and squeezed his thigh. "It's done," she whispered. He nodded, but his pulse still pounded. Not guilt, fear, because Olivia hadn't screamed at the end. She hadn't begged. She had simply looked at him and said, "If you do this, you will regret it." He dismissed it as emotion. He did not realize it was certainty. Back on the roadside, Olivia's consciousness flickered. Sirens approached. As paramedics lifted her onto a stretcher, her wallet slipped from her coat pocket. The lottery ticket slid halfway out, unnoticed, for now, but not for long. Daniel didn't go home. He drove straight to Vanessa's apartment. The city lights looked sharper than usual, almost unreal, as if the world had been scrubbed clean of consequence. His hands finally began to tremble when he turned off the engine. Vanessa leaned over and kissed him slowly. "It's over," she murmured. "You're free now." Free. The word slid into his chest like something he had been starving for. Free from arguments about late payments. Free from Olivia questioning his risky expansions. Free from her steady, practical voice reminding him of reality. But freedom felt strangely like silence. Upstairs, Vanessa opened a bottle of champagne she had already placed in the refrigerator earlier that day, a detail that would matter later. She had expected a turning point tonight. She just hadn't expected it to be this dramatic. "You're shaking," she said, pouring 2 glasses. "I'm not," Daniel snapped too quickly. She tilted her head, studying him. "You said no one would be on that road." There wasn't. But even as he said it, an image flickered in his mind. Olivia's body rolling, the thud, the unnatural angle of her arm. He swallowed hard and drained half the glass in one swallow. Across town, in the emergency room, Olivia's body lay under harsh white lights. "BP stabilizing," a nurse called. "Possible rib fractures," a doctor added. "Prep imaging." She drifted in and out of awareness, pain slicing through every shallow breath. The ceiling lights blurred into long streaks. Somewhere nearby, a monitor beeped steadily. Proof of life. Alive. That word began to settle into her bones. Alive meant choice. Alive meant time. Alive meant Daniel was wrong. When a nurse gently emptied her coat pockets into a clear plastic bag, the folded lottery ticket slipped out and floated to the floor. Emily Reyes, the nurse on duty, picked it up casually. "You don't want to lose this?" she said softly, sliding it back into the bag. Olivia's eyelids fluttered. The numbers, the television. The moment in the break room when her coworkers had laughed at the news broadcast while she quietly checked her phone app again and again, heart racing. She had memorized them. Even through the haze of pain medication, she whispered, "The ticket." Emily leaned closer. "It's safe." 3 hours earlier, Olivia had been sitting alone in that hospital break room after her shift, staring at the screen in disbelief. She had considered calling Daniel immediately. She had even typed the message, "We need to talk," on "It's important." But she deleted it. Because the last time she said something was important, he had responded with, "Unless it's about money, It can wait. Now money was exactly what it was about. Back at Vanessa's apartment, Daniel scrolled through his phone. He had already typed a message to a close associate. Things are changing. Big opportunities ahead. Vanessa climbed into his lap. "You deserve this," she whispered. "You were suffocating." He nodded slowly. Suffocating. That was the word he used whenever Olivia asked questions about missing funds or loan extensions. Suffocating when she suggested slowing expansion. Suffocating when she insisted on joint transparency. He had convinced himself she was holding him back. He had convinced himself that if she were gone, everything would accelerate. But beneath the alcohol and celebration, another thought crept in. What if someone found her? He pushed it away. "She won't survive that," he muttered. Vanessa didn't ask how he knew. Meanwhile, in the hospital room, a television mounted high on the wall replayed the lottery drawing. Emily froze mid-step. The numbers scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Her eyes widened. She glanced at the plastic belongings bag on the counter. Slowly, carefully, she unfolded the ticket. Her mouth parted. Every number matched. She turned toward Olivia, who lay pale and bruised beneath white sheets. "Ma'am," Emily whispered urgently, "you need to see this." Olivia forced her eyes open. Emily held up the ticket and pointed to the television. For a moment, Olivia thought she was hallucinating. Then understanding crashed over her harder than the asphalt had. She hadn't imagined it. She hadn't misread it. $500 million. And Daniel believed she was dead. Her cracked lips curved slightly despite the pain. Alive, rich, and invisible. Across town, Daniel raised his glass again. "To new beginnings," he said. He didn't know that, at that exact moment, the wife he pushed out of a moving car was staring at a lottery ticket worth $500 million. And she was starting to think, not about survival, about consequences. Olivia did not scream when she realized she had won. She did not cry. She did not laugh. She went completely still, because stillness was something she had mastered long before tonight. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Nurse Emily asked gently, mistaking shock for medical distress. Olivia's eyes remained locked on the ticket. The numbers glowed on the television screen above like fate etched in neon. I need a phone," Olivia whispered. Her voice was raw from impact and dust, but steady. 3 hours ago, she had been a wife begging her husband not to destroy their marriage. Now she was a survivor with $500 million and a husband who believed she was dead. That contrast settled into her bones like steel. Back at Vanessa's apartment, Daniel stood at the balcony, staring down at the glittering city below. He told himself the shaking in his hands was adrenaline. "She's gone," he muttered. Vanessa slipped her arms around his waist from behind. "You said she wouldn't survive," she said softly. "I know." He knew the road had been isolated. He knew the speed. He knew the angle of her fall. But he didn't know about the truck driver who had doubled back after spotting something unnatural on the roadside. He didn't know about the dash cam footage. He didn't know that survival is sometimes stubborn. In the hospital, Olivia dialed the state lottery office with trembling fingers. The representative confirmed what she already knew. The ticket was authentic. A $500 million jackpot. She would need to present identification in person to begin the claim process. Olivia's gaze drifted to the ceiling. Identification. Her wallet. Her legal name. Daniel Carter's wife. The irony almost made her laugh, because the man who had just tried to erase her had no idea she now possessed the kind of power that rewrites entire lives. But instead of joy, a colder emotion surfaced. Memory. She remembered the night Daniel first mentioned Vanessa. "She understands ambition," he had said. "You don't." She remembered the day he removed her access to their joint account. "It's temporary," he claimed. She remembered the last argument before tonight. "If you ever try to take what's mine," he had hissed, "I'll make sure you walk away with nothing." She had thought it was anger talking. Now she understood it was confession. Olivia asked for a mirror. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen, lip split, shoulder immobilized. He had pushed her out of a moving car, and then he had celebrated. That realization hardened something inside her. Not rage, precision. Meanwhile, Daniel opened his phone and began drafting a missing person report. He rehearsed his concern carefully, planting phrases that would later serve as protection. She was emotional. She jumped. She had been unstable. He was building a narrative. He didn't realize Olivia was building something far more dangerous. Back in the hospital room, Olivia made her second call. Not to family, not to friends, to a lawyer. Michael Grant had a reputation for dismantling men who thought they were untouchable. When his assistant answered, Olivia said calmly, "I need legal counsel immediately. This is about attempted murder." Silence filled the line. "Are you safe?" the assistant asked. "Yes," Olivia replied. "For now." That "for now" wasn't fear, it was strategy, because Daniel believed she was gone, and that ignorance was her greatest weapon. She didn't tell the police immediately. Not yet. Step 3. Layer with deep foreshadowing. She remembered Daniel's second phone, the one he kept hidden in the garage. She remembered overhearing him say, "If she's out of the picture, everything moves faster." She remembered the lone default letters he thought she hadn't seen. Evidence, pieces, threads. If she moved too fast, he would deny everything. If she moved strategically, he would trap himself. Across town, Vanessa clinked her glass against Daniel's again. To freedom, she smiled. But Daniel's mind flickered back to Olivia's final words in the car. "If you do this, you will regret it." He brushed it off. She was just scared, he told himself. He didn't understand that calm people are often the most dangerous when betrayed. In the hospital bed, Olivia closed her eyes. She wasn't thinking about revenge. She was thinking about timing. Because survival gave her time, and $500 million gave her leverage. And Daniel, unaware she had survived and unaware she had just won a $500 million lottery, was walking confidently into his own ruin. She didn't need to chase him. She would let him celebrate, let him walk away, let him talk, let him expose himself. And when the moment was perfect, she would step back into his life, alive, rich, and ready. Daniel barely slept. Vanessa drifted off beside him, her breathing soft and satisfied, but Daniel's mind kept replaying the sound of the car door unlocking. Click. He stared at the ceiling in the dark, convincing himself he had done what was necessary. The dealership had been bleeding cash for months. Investors were restless. Creditors had begun circling. If Olivia demanded half in a divorce, the collapse would be immediate. He had told himself it was survival. He had told himself she was the obstacle. He had told himself no one would ever know. At 6:17 a.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. His stomach tightened. He hesitated before answering. "Mr. Carter?" a male voice asked. "Yes?" "This is Officer Reynolds. We received your missing person report early this morning regarding your wife." Daniel swallowed. "Yes, she jumped from the car. We argued. She was emotional." There was a pause. "We found evidence of an incident on Highway 48, the officer said carefully. "We'd like you to come down and give a formal statement." Daniel's pulse spiked. Evidence. "What kind of evidence?" he asked, keeping his tone steady. "Sir, we'll discuss that in person." The line clicked dead. Vanessa stirred. "What is it?" "Police," he muttered. Her expression shifted, not to fear, but calculation. "Stick to the story," she said calmly. "She was unstable. You tried to stop her." Daniel nodded. Stick to the story. Across town, Olivia was already awake. Pain pulsed through her ribs, but clarity sharpened her thoughts. Michael Grant stood near the window of her hospital room, hands in his pockets, studying her quietly. He had arrived before sunrise. "You're certain he pushed you?" he asked. "Yes." "No hesitation? No slip?" "No." Michael nodded once. He wasn't surprised. He had seen this pattern before: financial pressure, infidelity, escalating hostility. "Here's the complication," he said. "He reported you as jumping." Olivia's lips curved faintly. "Of course he did." Michael leaned closer. "We don't confront him yet." She met his gaze. "I don't want to." He studied her expression, searching for emotional instability, rage, recklessness. He found none, only resolve. "Why?" he asked. "Because he thinks I'm gone," she replied. "And when people think they've won, they get careless." Michael's eyebrow lifted slightly. "Do you have access to his financial records?" she asked. He hesitated. "Through discovery, eventually." She looked toward the plastic bag containing her belongings. "I may not need discovery." He followed her gaze to the lottery ticket. It still hadn't fully sunk in. $500 million. Michael lowered his voice. "You've confirmed it?" "Yes." "And he doesn't know?" "No." A slow understanding formed in the lawyer's mind. This wasn't just a criminal case anymore. It was leverage. Meanwhile, Daniel sat across from Officer Reynolds in a sterile interview room. "So you're saying your wife opened the door herself?" the officer asked. "Yes," Daniel replied. "She was hysterical. I tried to grab her." Reynolds flipped a folder open. "Witness says your car accelerated after she fell." Daniel's throat tightened. "What witness?" "A truck driver, Mark Halston." Daniel hadn't seen him. He forced a frown. "I panicked." Reynolds watched him closely. "And you didn't call 911? "I thought she was already gone." The room grew quiet. Back at the hospital, Olivia asked Michael for something specific. "I want you to look into Daniel's dealership loans," she said. "Who holds them?" Michael made a note. "You think he's drowning?" he asked. "I know he is," she replied softly. 6 months ago, Daniel had mortgaged their home without fully explaining the terms. He had assured her it was temporary capital expansion. She had signed, trusting him. 3 months later, she found overdue notices hidden in his office drawer. He had smiled and said, "You worry too much." Now she understood. He wasn't pushing her because he hated her. He was pushing her because he was sinking. And sinking men grab anything, or anyone, they think is dragging them down. Michael stepped closer to the bed. "If you want to ruin him financially," he said carefully, "that kind of money gives you options." Olivia's gaze hardened slightly. "I don't want revenge," she said. Michael waited. "I want consequences." Across town, Daniel left the police station with sweat soaking through his shirt. "They don't have proof," Vanessa said when he told her about the witness. "They have something." She cupped his face. "Then we stay calm." But calm was unraveling, because at that exact moment, paperwork was beginning to process at the state lottery office. Olivia Carter, alive, winner. And Daniel Carter was walking into meetings that would soon involve creditors he no longer controlled. He thought the worst was behind him. He didn't realize the worst hadn't even begun. Daniel walked into his dealership that morning with forced confidence. The showroom lights reflected off polished hoods and spotless windshields, but beneath the shine, everything was cracking. 2 sales managers stopped talking when he passed. His head accountant avoided eye contact. He told himself it was paranoia, but pressure has a smell, and today it was thick. In his office, he opened his laptop and pulled up the loan dashboard. 3 major lenders, 2 bridge loans, 1 private investor, all demanding accelerated repayment schedules within 90 days. He exhaled slowly. Olivia would have panicked at those numbers, and Olivia would have insisted they scale back expansion. Olivia would have questioned every signature, and that was exactly why he convinced himself she had to go. She didn't understand growth, he muttered, but growth built on debt isn't growth, it's gravity. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "This is Carter." "Mr. Carter," a crisp voice said, "this is Rebecca Sloan from Harlow and Finch Capital. We're calling regarding the acquisition of your outstanding loans." Daniel froze. "Acquisition?" he repeated. "Yes. As of this morning, your primary debt portfolio has been purchased by our firm." His chair creaked as he leaned back. "Purchased by who?" he demanded. "Harlow and Finch Capital," she repeated smoothly. "We now hold your obligations. Updated payment terms will be sent shortly." The call ended before he could respond. He stared at the screen. He had never heard of Harlow and Finch. Across town, Olivia sat upright in her hospital bed, laptop open in front of her. Michael stood nearby. "Is it done?" she asked. He nodded once. "Yes, the firm is officially registered under a private trust. No public connection to you." She inhaled slowly. $500 million moves quietly when handled correctly. Within 48 hours of confirming her lottery win, she had chosen anonymity, assembled a financial advisory team, and instructed them to identify Daniel's most vulnerable pressure point: debt. Men like Daniel don't fear morality. They fear losing control. Step 3, layer with deep foreshadowing. Months earlier, Olivia had overheard Daniel brag to Vanessa on speakerphone in the garage. "If I own the leverage, I own the game." She never forgot that sentence. Now she owned the leverage. Michael studied her expression carefully. "This is escalation," he said. "Yes," she replied calmly. "Once payment terms tighten, he'll panic." "Good." There was no hysteria in her voice, only calculation. Meanwhile, Daniel called his financial advisor in a rush. "What do you know about Harlow and Finch?" he demanded. Silence. "I've never heard of them," the advisor admitted, "but acquisitions like this aren't unusual." "They're tightening the payment schedule," Daniel snapped. "That's not standard." The advisor hesitated. "If you can't meet revised terms, they can trigger collateral clauses." Collateral, the dealership, the house, everything. Vanessa arrived at his office that afternoon, heels sharp against marble tile. "You look pale," she said. "Our loans were bought." "So? So the new firm isn't playing nice?" She smiled dismissively. "You always find a way." But confidence without information is dangerous. That evening, Daniel received another envelope, certified delivery. He tore it open casually. Then his hands began to shake. Divorce papers. Petitioner, Olivia Carter. His vision blurred. "That's impossible," he whispered. Vanessa grabbed the document. "She's alive?" Daniel's breath shortened. "No," he muttered. "No, she—" But the hospital had already filed her survival report. Police had already documented injuries. And Olivia had deliberately timed the divorce filing after the debt acquisition finalized. Precision. Daniel's phone rang again. Officer Reynolds. "Mr. Carter," the officer said evenly. "We have additional questions. Your wife is alive." The words landed like a hammer. Alive. Vanessa stepped back slowly. Daniel felt something collapse inside him. Alive meant testimony. Alive meant contradiction. Alive meant his story was unraveling. Across town, Olivia closed her laptop gently. "Phase 1, she whispered. Michael looked at her. "You understand," he said carefully. "Once criminal charges move forward, there's no turning back. She met his eyes. He pushed me out of a moving car. Silence. Outside her hospital window, the world continued as if nothing had shifted. Traffic moved. People laughed. But somewhere in the city, Daniel Carter's illusion of control was fracturing. He had celebrated. He had walked away. He had believed she was gone. Now she was alive, worth $500 million, and quietly dismantling him piece by piece. Daniel didn't drive home that night. He drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The word alive echoed in his skull like a siren. Alive meant she could speak. Alive meant she could testify. Alive meant she could expose everything. Vanessa's last words replayed in his mind before he left her apartment. "Fix this, Daniel. Fix this," as if attempted murder were a scheduling conflict. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his accountant. "Daniel, we have a serious problem." He almost laughed. "Define serious." "The new firm, Harlow and Finch, they've triggered an accelerated clause. You're required to cover 30% of the outstanding balance within 14 days. "That's impossible." "I know." Silence stretched between them. Daniel's dealership had been leveraged to its ceiling. He had used projected sales to justify expansion. He had signed documents late at night without reading fine print. Olivia had questioned him once about one of those clauses. "If revenue dips, what happens?" she had asked. "Revenue won't dip," he replied confidently. But it had, and now someone owned his weakness. He pulled the car over and stared into the dark windshield. Who was Harlow and Finch? Why move this fast? Across town, Olivia was no longer in a hospital gown. She wore a tailored navy suit, her injured arms supported discreetly under the fabric. Bruises were fading from deep purple to yellow. Pain still pulsed through her ribs, but clarity sharpened her movements. Michael walked beside her as they entered a private conference room at the Lottery Commission office. The claim process was confidential. Anonymous trust, structured payout, legal shields in place. "Once this finalizes," Michael said quietly, "your liquidity changes everything." Olivia signed calmly. It wasn't joy she felt. It was grounding. She remembered the early years with Daniel, when he cried the night his first dealership loan was denied. She had stayed up until 3 a.m. helping him rewrite proposals. She had cashed out her modest retirement account to fund his first inventory purchase. She had believed in him before anyone else did. And when success started trickling in, so did pride, then secrecy, then contempt. The night he first called her replaceable, something inside her shifted. She didn't realize then how prophetic that word would become. Back in his car, Daniel made a decision. He called Olivia's number. It rang. Once, twice, then, "Hello?" Her voice, alive, calm, his throat tightened. "Olivia?" A pause. "Yes, Daniel." No anger, no trembling, just steady. I thought you were dead," she finished softly. He swallowed. "I panicked that night." "You accelerated," she corrected. Silence. "I didn't mean—" "You pushed me out of a moving car." The clarity in her tone stripped him of excuses. "I can fix this," he said quickly. "We don't need lawyers." A faint exhale came through the line. "You're right," she said. Relief flooded him for half a second. Then she continued. "We don't need lawyers for marriage anymore. We need them for court." The line went dead. Daniel stared at his phone. For the first time, fear replaced denial. Meanwhile, Olivia placed her phone gently on the table. Michael watched her carefully. "You stayed composed," he said. She nodded once. "He's unraveling." Outside the commission building, a black SUV waited to transport her discreetly to a secure residence arranged under the trust. Money had already begun insulating her. Protection, resources, influence. But she wasn't intoxicated by power. She was methodical. because Daniel's next moves would determine the speed of his collapse. Back at the dealership, 2 investors had already scheduled emergency meetings. Rumors were circulating about the police inquiry. Word spreads fast when stability smells uncertain. Vanessa texted him repeatedly. "Are you sure she won't settle? You need to talk to her. This can't ruin us." Us? Daniel suddenly understood something uncomfortable. Vanessa loved his ambition, but she loved his success more, and success was slipping. Across the city skyline, Olivia looked out from the back seat of the SUV. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't crying. She was remembering the shove, the asphalt, the silence after, and the champagne glass raised in celebration. He had celebrated her death. He had walked away. Now he would walk into consequences. But she would not chase him. She would let pressure do its work. Debt, investors, police, public narrative. She would apply force exactly where it hurt most, and when the walls finally closed in, she would be standing, alive, worth $500 million, on and completely out of his reach. By the 7th day, Daniel stopped sleeping entirely, not because of guilt, but because everything was tightening at once. 2 investors had pulled out quietly. One demanded immediate review of all financial statements. The accelerated loan clause from Harlow and Finch Capital loomed like a countdown clock above his head. 14 days, 30% repayment, or collateral seizure. He had spent years building the Carter Auto Group brand. Sleek showrooms, confident marketing, bold expansion. But he now understood something chilling. He had built it on borrowed time, and someone had just bought that time. He slammed his office drawer shut when his accountant stepped in. "The auditors are asking questions," the accountant said carefully. "About what?" "Cash flow discrepancies." "And the police contacted HR." Daniel's chest tightened. "They're investigating the incident with Olivia." Incident. The word felt too small for what had happened. Daniel forced composure. Stick to the narrative. But narratives crack under pressure. Meanwhile, across town, Olivia stepped into a temporary executive office space registered under the Harlow and Finch Trust. The name on the building directory listed her only as O. Grant Holdings, a quiet layer between her identity and the firm now controlling Daniel's debt. Michael reviewed documents across the table. "He's scrambling," Michael said. "How bad?" Olivia asked. "He's leveraged beyond recovery if liquidity doesn't appear." She nodded slowly. She remembered Daniel once explaining leverage to her over dinner. "You don't need to own everything," he said confidently. "You just need to control it." He had smiled like a strategist. Now she controlled the pressure point. Months ago, Olivia had noticed Daniel's fear wasn't losing her. It was losing status. He cared about how investors saw him, how competitors envied him, how Vanessa admired him. Humiliation would wound him deeper than prison. Back at the dealership, Vanessa arrived unannounced again. "You look terrible," she said bluntly. He glared. "Helpful? Is she pressing charges?" "She hasn't yet." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Then maybe she wants money." Daniel stiffened. "She won't get a cent." "You don't know that." Her tone shifted. Less affection, more concern for self-preservation. "You said she was out of the picture," Vanessa pressed. "She was supposed to be." The words slipped out before he could catch them. Vanessa stared at him. "Daniel, what exactly did you do?" He didn't answer, because answering would mean saying it aloud. Across the city, Olivia sat across from a senior compliance officer. "Are you prepared for public exposure once criminal proceedings move forward?" the officer asked. "Yes," Olivia replied calmly. "And you understand that controlling his debt could be viewed as retaliatory?" "I understand," she folded her hands. "I'm not destroying him illegally," she added. "I'm enforcing contractual terms." There was a difference. That difference was what separated revenge from consequence. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. "Mrs. Carter," a journalist's voice said. "We've received information that you survived a roadside incident involving your husband. Care to comment?" Olivia paused. Here it was. Public narrative. "Yes," she said softly. I survived." The word carried weight. "Are you pressing charges?" "That will be handled legally," she replied. She ended the call and looked at Michael. "It's starting." He nodded. Once media scent blood, they circle fast. That evening, Daniel turned on the television in his living room. Breaking news. Local business owner under investigation after wife survives highway incident. His face appeared on screen beside a stock photo of the dealership. Vanessa stood frozen beside him. "They're saying you pushed her," she whispered. "I didn't," he began, then stopped, because the footage showed the truck driver's dashcam image, his car speeding away. The acceleration was undeniable. He felt something collapse in his chest. The phone began ringing. Investors, reporters, legal inquiries. Vanessa stepped back slowly. "You didn't tell me it was this bad." He looked at her. "You said you loved me." Her silence answered him. Across town, Olivia watched the same broadcast from a quiet, secured residence. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't celebrating. She was steady, because humiliation had begun. She remembered Daniel mocking a competitor once when a scandal hit. "In business," he said smugly, "perception is everything." Now perception was turning against him. Her phone buzzed again, this time from Officer Reynolds. "We're moving forward with charges," he said firmly. "We have enough." Olivia exhaled slowly. The wheel had turned. She closed her eyes briefly, remembering asphalt against skin, air torn from lungs, the hollow silence after impact. He had celebrated. He had walked away. But he had miscalculated one thing. She survived. And survival is unpredictable. Daniel stared at the television as analysts dissected his reputation in real time. Vanessa quietly picked up her purse. "Where are you going?" he asked. "I need space," she said. The door closed softly behind her. For the first time, Daniel was alone. The champagne from a week ago felt like a lifetime ago. And somewhere in the city, the wife he believed he had erased was not only alive, she was orchestrating the slow, legal, irreversible dismantling of everything he built. By day 10, Daniel's world no longer felt solid. The dealership showroom that once buzzed with confident sales pitches now hummed with whispers. 2 senior salesmen had resigned quietly. A third called in sick after reporters began parking across the street. Customers were canceling appointments. And investors were requesting emergency audits. And Harlow and Finch Capital had sent the second notice. 7 days remaining, 30% due, or enforcement begins. Daniel sat in his glass office, staring at the numbers on his screen, but they blurred into meaninglessness. He had built his identity around momentum, around expansion, around dominance. Now everything was contracting. His phone buzzed again. Officer Reynolds. "We have enough to proceed with formal charges," the officer said evenly. "You'll be receiving documentation shortly. We advise you to retain criminal counsel." The word criminal struck him harder than any accusation before. "I told you she jumped," Daniel insisted weakly. "We have vehicle telemetry," Reynolds replied. "Acceleration data contradicts your statement." Daniel felt heat crawl up his neck. Technology. And he hadn't even considered that. He had planned the push emotionally, not strategically. Across the city, Olivia sat in a private conference room reviewing the finalized lottery transfer structure. The funds were now secure, diversified, and insulated through layered trusts. She was no longer just wealthy. She was protected. Michael entered quietly. "He's officially being charged," he said. Olivia closed the folder in front of her. Attempted homicide. Insurance fraud investigation pending. Public narrative shifting rapidly. She felt something unexpected then. Not triumph. Closure beginning. She remembered the first time Daniel raised his voice at her over money. It wasn't about numbers. It was about pride. He couldn't tolerate feeling small. And when his dealership began faltering, that smallness turned to resentment. He didn't push her because he stopped loving her. He pushed her because he felt exposed. And exposed men become dangerous. Michael studied her face. "You're certain about enforcing the accelerated clause?" he asked. "Yes." "Once enforcement begins, the dealership will collapse." Olivia nodded. "He accelerated when he thought I wouldn't survive." Silence filled the room. "Now I accelerate." Meanwhile, Daniel sat across from a criminal defense attorney. "Your situation is severe," the attorney said bluntly. "Dashcam footage, medical testimony, inconsistencies in your report." Daniel leaned forward. "What if she drops the charges?" "That's unlikely. The state can proceed independently." Daniel's hands trembled. "And financially?" he asked. The attorney hesitated. "If the new debt holder enforces collateral seizure, you could lose the dealership before trial." Everything was converging. Police, debt, media. Vanessa hadn't returned his calls in 2 days. His phone buzzed again. This time it was from Harlow and Finch. Formal notice of enforcement. Effective immediately, non-compliance will result in asset seizure proceedings. Daniel felt the room spin. Across town, Olivia watched market feeds update in real time. The enforcement clause triggered automatically. Her advisory team moved swiftly, precisely. There was no yelling, no public gloating, just execution of contracts Daniel himself had signed months ago. She remembered sitting across from him at dinner when he said, "Contracts protect the smart ones." He had smiled confidently. Now his own contracts were protecting her. News broke before sunset. A Carter Auto Group faces asset seizure. Amid criminal investigation, reporters crowded outside the dealership. Employees left early. Suppliers halted deliveries. Daniel stood alone in his empty showroom, staring at the polished floor. He remembered opening day, cutting the ribbon, Olivia standing proudly beside him, eyes shining. She had believed in him then. Now she was dismantling him. His phone rang. Olivia. He hesitated before answering. "Why?" he asked immediately. There was no anger in his voice now, only exhaustion. "Because you tried to kill me?" she replied calmly. "I panicked." "You accelerated." Silence. "You're taking everything," he whispered. "No," she corrected softly. "You signed everything." The distinction crushed him. Outside, a tow truck began removing inventory vehicles under legal order. Daniel watched through the glass as one of his most expensive cars was loaded away. Symbolism he couldn't ignore. He had celebrated too early. He had walked away too confidently. Now everything he walked away with was being pulled from beneath him. Across town, Olivia stood by a window overlooking the city skyline. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply breathed. The woman who had been pushed out of a moving car was standing, steady, watching the collapse of the empire that tried to erase her. But this wasn't over yet, because humiliation was only phase 2, and Daniel still hadn't felt the full weight of public truth. By the time the asset seizure trucks finished clearing the dealership lot, Daniel Carter's name was trending, not for innovation, not for expansion, for attempted murder. The news cycle moved fast, but scandal moved faster. Former employees began speaking anonymously. Investors distanced themselves publicly. Competitors who once envied him now issued polite statements about ethical leadership. And then came the footage. The truck driver, Mark Halston, released a clearer segment of his dash cam recording to authorities, and it leaked. The grainy clip showed Daniel's car drifting toward the shoulder. It showed the passenger door swing open. It showed a figure tumble, and most damning of all, it showed the vehicle surge forward instead of braking. The acceleration was unmistakable. Daniel watched it on repeat in his living room, jaw clenched, eyes hollow. "It looks worse than it was," he muttered to no one. But truth doesn't negotiate with optics. Across town, Olivia sat in a quiet office with Michael and a public relations consultant. "You don't need to attack him," the consultant advised. "You just need to speak once." Olivia nodded. She had no interest in screaming matches on television, but silence can sometimes protect the wrong person. She remembered the night Daniel first shoved her during an argument. It wasn't hard. It wasn't violent enough to leave bruises. But it was the first crack in something sacred. She had told herself it was stress. She had told herself he didn't mean it. She had told herself marriage required endurance. That night on the highway was not sudden. It was escalation. And escalation happens when small lines go unchecked. Now she would draw the final line publicly. That evening, Olivia appeared on camera for the first time since the incident. No dramatic makeup. No fury, just clarity. "Yes," she said when the interviewer asked directly. "My husband pushed me out of a moving car." The studio fell silent. "I survived," she continued calmly. "Not because of him, in spite of him." The interviewer hesitated. "Why not settle privately?" she asked. Olivia paused. "Because silence protects the wrong person." Across town, Daniel watched the broadcast in stunned disbelief. She wasn't hysterical. She wasn't vindictive. She was composed. And composure is powerful. Vanessa texted him for the first time in days. "This is too big. I can't be involved in this." He stared at the message. Too big. She had loved ambition, but she didn't love collapse. Daniel typed back, "We're still together, right?" No response. Meanwhile, Harlow and Finch Capital filed the final enforcement motion. The dealership was officially entering receivership. Daniel's legal team warned him bluntly. "You're fighting on two fronts," his attorney said, "criminal charges and financial collapse. If convicted, prison is likely." The word prison echoed. Daniel's breathing grew shallow. He had spent his life building control. Now control had evaporated. Across the city skyline, Olivia stood on the balcony of her secure residence, wind brushing gently against her face. She thought about the moment of impact again, the asphalt, the silence, the taste of blood. He had believed she was finished. He had celebrated. He had walked away. But survival had rewritten everything. Her phone rang. Michael. "There's one more thing," he said carefully. "Vanessa is cooperating with investigators." Olivia closed her eyes briefly. Of course she was. Or when loyalty is built on convenience, it dissolves under pressure. She remembered Vanessa's subtle tension the night she first visited their home, how she studied Olivia, not with empathy, but assessment. Vanessa never loved Daniel. She loved proximity to success. And success had vanished? Back in his darkened living room, Daniel realized he was alone. No investors, no employees, no mistress. The dealership sign outside flickered, scheduled to be removed in the morning. He replayed Olivia's words from the interview. Silence protects the wrong person. He had counted on her silence. He had counted on her being too gentle to fight back. He had mistaken kindness for weakness. Now he was the one exposed. Court dates were scheduled, asset transfers finalized, public opinion cemented. And the wife he pushed out of a moving car was not only alive, she was standing in full daylight, worth $500 million, steady and unshaken. But there was one final chapter left, because consequences were no longer theoretical. They were approaching in real time. The courtroom was quieter than Daniel expected. No dramatic gasps, no cinematic shouting, just the heavy, suffocating stillness of consequence. He sat at the defense table in a gray suit that suddenly felt too large for him. The man who once commanded showrooms and negotiated million-dollar deals now avoided eye contact with reporters seated behind him. Across the aisle, Olivia sat with Michael. She did not look triumphant. She looked steady, alive. That word carried more weight in that room than any accusation. Alive meant testimony. Alive meant memory. Or alive meant he had failed. The prosecution presented the sequence calmly. Vehicle telemetry showing acceleration after impact. Dashcam footage confirming no braking attempt. Medical testimony detailing injuries consistent with forceful ejection, not voluntary jumping. Vanessa's statement confirming Daniel had said, "She won't survive that." Each piece landed like a quiet hammer. Daniel's defense tried to frame panic, emotional distress, misinterpretation. But facts are stubborn. When Olivia took the stand, the room shifted. She walked carefully, her healed shoulder still slightly stiff, but her posture upright. "Mrs. Carter," the prosecutor began, "did you open that door yourself?" "No." "Did you jump?" "No." "Did your husband push you?" "Yes." The simplicity of her answer sliced deeper than drama ever could. She did not cry. She did not rage. She described the click of the door, the sudden shove, the acceleration. Then she paused. "And what did he do after you fell?" the prosecutor asked. "He drove away." Silence swallowed the room. She remembered their first anniversary, Daniel promising he would always protect her. She remembered signing loan papers she didn't fully understand because she trusted him. She remembered believing love meant endurance. But love without safety is illusion. And illusion had nearly cost her life. When cross-examination attempted to provoke her, asking about marital tension, financial disagreements, she answered evenly. "Yes, we argued about money. Yes, he was under pressure. No, that does not justify pushing someone out of a moving car." Daniel stared at the table. And for the first time since the night of the highway, he looked small. When the verdict came, it wasn't dramatic. Guilty. Attempted homicide. Additional financial fraud investigations pending. The judge's sentence was firm. Years in prison. Restitution. Permanent revocation of business licenses. Daniel's shoulders slumped as officers approached. For a brief second, his eyes lifted to meet Olivia's. Not hatred, not anger. Regret. But regret arrives too late when damage is deliberate. He was led away without another word. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Olivia stood at the podium. "Do you feel vindicated?" a reporter shouted. She paused. "I feel alive," she said. "Do you regret not settling privately?" Silence would have protected the wrong person. The statement echoed across headlines within hours. Meanwhile, the Carter Auto Group sign was removed permanently. Assets liquidated. Debt resolved under enforcement. Vanessa relocated quietly out of state. Public memory would eventually move on. But Daniel's record would not. That evening, Olivia returned to her residence overlooking the city. $500 million sat protected in diversified accounts, not as a weapon, but as security. She had already established a foundation supporting survivors of domestic violence and financial abuse. She funded trauma units at regional hospitals. She built quietly, purposefully. The money did not define her. Survival did. Standing on her balcony, she replayed the moment on the highway one last time. The shove, the asphalt, the silence. He had believed pushing her out of a moving car would end her story. He had celebrated with his mistress. He had walked away. But survival changed the ending. She didn't ruin him with chaos. She ruined him with patience, with law, with leverage, with truth. And perhaps the most devastating part for Daniel was not prison, not bankruptcy, not public humiliation. It was knowing that the woman he tried to erase had become untouchable, alive, resilient, worth $500 million, and completely beyond his reach. The city lights shimmered below. Olivia turned away from the railing and stepped back inside. Her story was no longer about him. It was about what happens when someone survives and chooses not revenge, but consequence.